What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see the daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, in this video today, I'm going to be asking a question that I want to hear from you guys. I'm going to be giving my response to it, but have the Baltimore Ravens done enough to help Lamar Jackson? I think this is a very interesting discussion. I think you can go either way. So in the comment section down below, please let me know what you guys think. And this is going to be an episode also on the podcast platforms and on Spotify. I've actually added a couple of features. One, you can watch the videos on Spotify as well. But two, I've started to ask Q&A questions on Spotify, and you can actually answer those, and I can pin certain messages in response. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to check out the Spotify, please do so. You know, it really does help out the podcast platforms if you listen or watch on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you know, whatever it is, Trust the Bank on all of those platforms. But let's get right into it. Let's talk about it. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's one of the best football players in the NFL. When you're looking at young players, the biggest question, whether you're talking about when they are young or you're talking about them 30 years after they retire, the debate is always the same. Did the team that drafted them give them enough help, enough support, enough surrounding talent to help them? And this has been a debate about every great quarterback in history. People debate Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady. And a lot of people, they'll look at them and be like, Tom Brady, better quarterback. And then people will say, Peyton Manning wasn't really given the help. He wasn't given the talent. Aaron Rodgers wasn't really given the talent around him. Tom Brady got a lot of stuff. So, when we're looking at Lamar Jackson, and we're looking at him coming into a potential contract extension, the question is, have the Ravens done enough to help him? Help him to win a Super Bowl? Help him to stay healthy? Help him to keep him wanting to stay in Baltimore? Lamar Jackson was drafted by Ozzie Newsome in his final draft as general manager. Then Eric DeCosta took over, and I'm going to go over some of the Eric DeCosta draft selections. First one was Hollywood Brown. He drafted Miles Boykin. He drafted a plethora of offensive linemen, typically offensive guards, but also he drafted Mr. Orlando Brown. Drafted a lot of players. Also, 2 wide receivers in almost every single draft under Eric DeCosta have been taken, whether it was Duvernay and Prochet, Bateman and Wallace. A lot of 2 wide receiver drafts. The Ravens have also brought in a plethora of different players, whether it was Seth Roberts, Willie Snead, whether it was Sammy Watkins. Overall, they've been bringing in a lot of pieces, but that's not the question. The question is not, have the Ravens brought in players for Lamar Jackson? It's, have they done enough? Because most of the players that I have named, I don't want to insult them, but they haven't done anything. No offense to Willie Snead, but Willie Snead was not a benefit to the Baltimore Ravens. Was he a starter? Yes. Was he a horrible player? No, he was not. But this is not the type of player that when you look at the great quarterbacks in the NFL and they are helped, for example, the Buffalo Bills, who did they bring in? Stephon Diggs, right? They helped him. Patrick Mahomes, they brought in Juju Smith-Schuster this year. You know, Tom Brady, his entire career. They brought in Randy Moss when he was younger. You know, overall, they didn't bring in any superstars like that. Now, they did draft Mark Andrews in the same draft that they took Lamar Jackson. But overall, since Lamar Jackson has become the starter, the players that the Baltimore Ravens have brought in have not been exceptional. They've been role players. There have been some decent signings, but the majority of the players that have been brought in have been huge letdowns. Whether it was Alejandro Villanueva or Seth Roberts or Sammy Watkins, the Ravens have not been putting the talent around Lamar Jackson that they would hope to do. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to say that I think the Ravens have done enough to help Lamar Jackson roster-wise. Roster-wise. because the coaching is an entirely different story. I don't know what that noise was. I apologize for that. But overall, when you're looking at the coaches, and this is not supposed to be a coach rant video, I will talk about this very briefly. I feel like the coaches have not been helpful to Lamar Jackson. They brought in Greg Roman. I think he was helpful in 2019, but then it stayed the exact same and honestly declined in the coaching staff. Now, last year, I think they did a great job bringing in T. Martin, bringing in Keith Williams. I thought those were great moves. But overall, Greg Roman has not been helping Lamar Jackson. That's all I'm going to say about the coaching. This video was not intended to talk about coaching. It was supposed to be talking about the roster. I kind of wasn't even thinking about coaching, and then I just kind of thought about it and was like, oh, well, okay. That's not the goal of the video. Overall, when you talk about the roster, the Ravens have been bringing in weapons. They've been bringing in enough to where I feel like they can win and they can contend. The Ravens have also been adding defensive players, and I think that gets overlooked when people talk about, oh, they're not helping Lamar Jackson. Because everyone talks about, oh, look at the wide receivers they brought in. Have they helped the offense? Not a ton. You know, I liked Hollywood Brown as a draft selection. I'm not one of those people that hates on Eric DeCosta for taking Hollywood over DK or A.J. Brown. I felt like the question was Hollywood versus A.J. Brown, and Hollywood fit what the Ravens needed. Hollywood was a great wide receiver for Lamar Jackson. You know, that was the perfect kind of guy they needed. A deep threat with great chemistry that sometimes can catch the football when Lamar Jackson puts it in a great spot. That overall is something that the Ravens have done. But the defense. In 2019, the Baltimore Ravens were struggling at the beginning of the year, and everyone looks back at that year. They won 12 consecutive games, the number one seed in the NFL. They had all the Pro Bowlers in the world. But Eric DeCosta, midway through that season, recognized that the defense needed a boost. And so he made a trade with the Los Angeles Rams, acquiring Marcus Peters. That helped the Baltimore Ravens. The next season, Eric DeCosta made another trade to acquire Calais Campbell. That helped the Baltimore Ravens. Eric DeCosta has not made a lot of drastic moves on the offensive side of the ball. And people, you can criticize him for that. He hasn't helped the offense a ton. But when you have Lamar Jackson, you don't need that much help as long as players are able to stay healthy. The defensive side of the ball has been the focus of the Baltimore Ravens since they brought in Lamar Jackson. And I think that makes sense. When you have a quarterback as good as Lamar Jackson and what he brings to the table, Lamar Jackson automatically will give you the best rushing attack in the NFL. It may not be the highest in total number of yards, but that is the team you don't want to play if you have a bad run defense. Because Lamar Jackson will expose you, and the running backs that he plays with will expose you no matter who they are. So if you have a really good run game, you got to have a good defense, because the goal is you time out the clock, and then you play defense and you limit the number of possessions. And the Ravens, under Lamar Jackson, have been trying to get better on defense. Now, last year, we have to get rid of last year. Last year doesn't count. Lamar got hurt. The whole team got hurt. But in the other years, the Ravens' defense was very solid. And that was the focus. Bring in Marcus Peters. Bring in Calais Campbell. Extend Marlon Humphrey. Right? That's been the focus of the team. Even this offseason. Was the focus to go out and trade for Devontae Adams or DK Metcalf? No, it was not. The focus was to get a safety, and they did that. They got Marcus Williams. Then they went into the draft, and they drafted Kyle Hamilton. The Ravens are helping Lamar Jackson, and I think they have helped him enough to help him to win the Super Bowl when it comes to building the roster. It's not in the traditional sense. The Baltimore Ravens are not a traditional organization. They believe in defense. They believe in running the football. That is the core of this team. Now, whether or not they have a great quarterback is besides the point. No matter who the Ravens have had at quarterback, throughout the history of the franchise, it's been two things: running the ball and playing defense. And for a couple of years, after we lost Ray Lewis, after we lost Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs was really old, the defense declined. And it's kept going downhill. And then all of a sudden Lamar came and it was like, oh, okay, now we have a great offense. But you got to get that defense, because the Ravens, yes, they have a great offense, but they don't have great offensive players outside of Lamar. It was Lamar, and then, his rookie year was Michael Crabtree, John Smokey Brown, and Hayden Hurst. But overall, it was like, okay, we got Lamar. That's enough to have a great offense. If you have a generational talent like Lamar Jackson, you're going to have a good offense. So they started working on the defense, and they've finally gotten that defense back up, and people, including myself, have been talking about it as maybe the best defense since the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, which is the best defense in the history of football, outside of the 1920-1921 Akron Pros. If you know football history, greatest defense of all time. But in the modern era, 2000 Baltimore Ravens, best defense of all time, arguably 85 Bears is the only other one. This defense is built like that. Pass rush, or at least front seven, very good. And then the secondary is historic. Like, historically good. Like, compared to the Legion of Boom, which is the best secondary in the history of football. That is the best comparison for this defense. So, when you give a quarterback a generational defense, that's doing enough. Now, is this defense going to be generational? We don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to see, are they able to live up to the hype? But the expectation is for this defense to be great. And they have given Lamar Jackson what he needs. Have they given him the best receiver in the NFL? No. But they've brought him an offensive line, right? They have brought in Morgan Moses. They've brought in Tyler Linderbaum. They brought in Kevin Zeitler, a very underrated signing from last season. They've drafted plenty of offensive guards, and we'll see who ends up taking the spot at left guard. We don't really know exactly who it'll be, but they've been bringing in a lot of pieces. They also drafted Daniel Flaherty. And they have running backs. Drafting J.K. Dobbins is very underrated in Eric DeCosta's tenure. Right? That gave them the 1-2 punch that Lamar Jackson needs. And they drafted Rashad Bateman. And we're going to see if they make any more additions. But overall, they have a run game that's going to be very good. And they have a great defense. That is enough. Now, could you do more? Yes. The question isn't have they done a perfect job, it's have they done enough. And I believe they have done enough for Lamar Jackson when it comes to building the roster. I'm not talking about coaching. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think the Ravens have done enough to help out Lamar Jackson, to keep him here, to help him win a Super Bowl when it comes to building the roster? Because I'm not trying to make this about coaching. That was not the intent of the question. Kind of thought about it halfway through the video. That's my bad. I apologize. But overall, I think they have done enough because they gave him a great defense and a great run game and some young weapons in the passing game. Like, they have Mark Andrews, who's a great weapon. He's wide receiver one for this team. They have a good offensive line, and they have some great running backs. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you're watching this on Spotify or listening on Spotify, I'm going to put this question in a Q&A. So if you want to answer it in the Q&A, what I can do is I highlight the messages so other people can see. But initially, the messages are not seen. So if you want to be anonymous, just say you want to be anonymous. That's totally fine. Other people won't see it unless I make it public. So thank you so much for watching or listening, and I will see all of you again